Chapter 4.7, Part 2. So we're going to get into warriors and battle scenes. So there's a lot of useful information when we look at some of these artworks. Um, you know, there's not always a written language for different cultures, or that written information is gone. So sometimes the artwork can be a very valuable record. So this is mainly, if we look in the deep past, bravery of warriors. That's the main thing, and the successes and defeats. The first thing we're going to look at is the Palette of Narmer. This is 5,000 years old. Isn't that mind-boggling? So this is one of the oldest pieces, if not the oldest piece of Egyptian art known. And this was to put eyeliner on. This was a little area right here. It was like a little mixing palette. If you kind of think about a compact, like where you would have makeup sort of in a little pooled area, and then you added water to it to make eyeliner. It's kind of an interesting thought. That's what this was. So, of course, there's no remnants of any of the black, what is called kohl, K-O-H-L, that Egyptian would use as eyeliner. That eyeliner, we see that a lot in Egyptian artwork. It was actually like an insect repellent and antibacterial, I believe. I know for sure it was insect repellent, but that's why they wore that heavy eyeliner. Because if you think about biting flies in the desert and how irritating that is, especially on children, so that eyeliner was mixed up here and put on. It just so happens this was quite an elaborate historical record as well. So this is our pharaoh, our King Narmer here, and this is about the unification of Upper and Lower Egypt, and that we see by these two sort of snake-necked lions, perhaps these creatures here intertwining their necks. That is the unification of these two places. This has 4 registers. This is a line here, that's a register, that's another register, and that's another from here to here, here to here, here to here, and here to here. Not unlike cartoons or like the graphic novels that we know today. And you see this also in the New World. The Moche culture in Peru uses this. It's kind of a commonplace way that we visually understand information, sort of in these different lined segments, if that makes sense. Here we see Narmer walking, and of course he's larger because that's hierarchical scale over here as well. He's a larger central figure. Also, he's on a register above other figures that are smaller, okay? These are not literally smaller people, but they're less important. Does that make sense? They're not children, they're just less important people. So he's depicted larger here and here. These are some beheaded, the heads are between their legs. So these are people that he's conquered. He has been victorious in battle. It's a bit grim, but that's how, that's the depiction they would show. These bulls show his strength here. And Horus is our bird over here. Sorry, my mouse isn't really doing what I wanted to do. The white crown symbolizes Upper Egypt, and the falcon represents the god Horus. Sorry, right here there's our crown, and there's Horus. So he is supporting him, and that's showing him unifying all of Egypt under his rule. Okay, so these guys are subjugated underneath him, if that makes sense. So he's the first pharaoh that we know about. Okay, so this is called the Bayeux Tapestry, and it's 275 feet long. I know it's kind of hard to imagine. We're looking at a small segment, of course, linen with wool. It's not really an actual tapestry. This is an embroidered piece, or it's embroidery. The difference is a tapestry, the imagery is woven into the fabric as it goes down, kind of like a carpet or a rug would be made. This is a piece of fabric with stitching in it. Can you kind of see that? That's just blank fabric, and then there's stitching here. So the name it's a misnomer. Somebody saw it and it looked like other tapestries when it was found, so that is what it was called. But it isn't. It sorry. It describes the Battle of Hastings in 1066 to 82. And it was made very close to that time, just after, and it was embroidered by women. So it shows the preparations of the Norman fleet, the Battle of Hastings itself, and the final coronation of William the Conqueror as King of England. This is on page 642. I'm reading from the book right here. The embroiderers were highly skilled, and to establish a sense of depth, each figure is given a border which is filled in with stitches running in the opposite direction to the rest of the embroidery, and then outlined in boldly contrasting colors. So we kind of see this horse with the rear leg. We get some overlapping there, so we get some depth of field, so that we have a sense that it's not a flat image. So it's kind of interesting for the Middle Ages. We get a little bit of depth here. And then we get a little bit of there's a bit of red stitching on the exterior of the blue. The red's showing out a little bit better here. So there's kind of like a greenish blue teal kind of color around the beige. So this has registers as well. We just talked about that, but there's a register here with the dead soldiers, like the battlefield, and this would be more of the horses and perhaps a different part of the battlefield because the size of the horse is smaller here. And then up here, there are different ornaments that probably have to do with the different the different French and Anglo. You see Angli, and then you see France here. So French and English battle, and William the Conqueror is one of the Normans, so that's French, and it's just a really amazing piece. It probably stretched along a long wall interior to a fort or a castle. Took 10 years to make. Okay, so similar piece. These are both long battle imagery on how you want to say it? It's very long, so it's stretched out, and different parts of the story are told in different segments. But in this case, when we're dealing with Japanese art, and actually Japanese books as well, we don't read left to right, we read right to left. So over here is the beginning, and then we have the middle, and then the burning over here, okay? So let me back up and just say this is isomeric perspective. This isomeric perspective, I don't know if any of you do video games, but you might recognize this, and that's this bird's eye view where we can kind of see to the side of things and then also on top of them. That's used a lot in video games so that you can kind of move through the space. I don't want to say in a realistic way. I'm hesitant to say that, but it's there so that you can kind of see, move through the space and still make sense of the holistic space. I guess that's a better way to say it. So this is the night attack on the Sanjo Palace, 23-foot long scroll, and it's meant to be read right to left, and we are guiding the viewer, us, by the diagonal lines of the building. So one of the things we're going to get into when we get into line and color and so on, chapter 1.1 is line, is that our eyes are going to follow, like, see how this is sort of an arrow pointing here? This is pointing that way, and diagonals are pointing that way. It's telling us to look here into this battle scene. So that's what the artist is using, and it's not like everybody studies these elements and principles. It's kind of an intuitive thing. The idea of color theory, as I mentioned, that was discovered more in the 1880s. Same is true for these elements and principles. They weren't really put into like a study guide until the Bauhaus, really, in 1919. That was much later. So the idea that they're still using this without, any studying going on here, but naturally diagonals show action. Also, red is going to catch our attention, so we're going to look at all that red and movement and all that turmoil, and it's going to catch our attention, and then we're going to focus on these different diagonals leading us through this story here. Okay? So multiple scenes meant to be viewed slowly, like over time. So you'd be kind of walking through the space, or in the case of the scrolls, sometimes those are on sort of a tabletop or the floor and they're rolled out in front of you. So it celebrates our victors. Again, it's heroic. Any battle scenes are going to be heroic and non-critical. That doesn't happen for a long time. Okay, Toltec, the Tula warriors. So not much is known about these. Very few remaining artworks of the Toltec. These are 15, 20 foot high, around the year 1000. So these are about 1,000 years old. And this is sort of the ancestral link to the Aztecs, the um, precursor to that culture. And the carving is really pretty intense. It's stylized. Of course, it's not like a realistic face, but it also looks. If you remember when we were looking at some of those low relief depictions of different gods and so on that would go on a wall, the style of it is still very similar with those blocky sort of segments, if that makes sense. But this is giving us some information of perhaps how their warfare and who their gods were, and it's also giving us information on what they would be wearing in battle. So that's about all we really get from here. Feathered headdresses, butterfly-shaped chest ornament, sandals decorated with symbols of the gods, and a belt supporting a large mirror shield on their lower back. So it's on page 643. And some spears and spear throwing device in his right hand. So sort of like almost like a bow and arrow, but a different sort of a setup this that these soldiers would have. You can kind of see the hand there more, and like kind of looks gun-like or something, but it's be for projecting the spears. Largest city in Mexico at this time. So just gives us some information about how they looked at that time.